Hi, I'm Amanda Gillies, and today on The Detail, the story, the war that has dominated news cycles around the world.
Breaking news from the Middle East. Israel has launched what it's calling a preemptive strike against Iran.
Explosions rocked multiple cities across Iran, including its capital, Tehran.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has been killed in a wave of unprecedented US-Israeli strikes.
Breaking tonight, U.S. troops killed in the Middle East with a new round of missile strikes and new word from the president on how long this operation could last.
But why did the war start? What is the history behind it? Should New Zealand have a stance on this war? And why is our Prime Minister so stumbly and unclear when he talks about it?
I think I misspoke on that. I mean, we've long supported action, but it's not at any cost, obviously.
But getting to that, obviously, wasn't easy.
Oh, I mean, we obviously understand. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that we understand this. I don't know how to be any clearer, guys. I mean,
where is his leadership? He needs to absolutely condemn this illegal warmongering by the US and by Israel. Show some guts.
Well, people will debate this. My question to proponents of international law is how evil does a dictator have to be before they lose those protections?
This is an evil regime that has killing its own people.
There is so much confusion, so much history, and so many arguments for and against. It's no wonder so many Kiwis don't know who to back or if they should back anyone. So today I talked to foreign correspondent Anna Fifield, who used to work in Iran for the Financial Times, as well as Newsroom's associate editor Sam Sachdeva for some insight into this fast-developing war. I begin with Anna, who starts with a quick history lesson.
This is not the first time that the United States has intervened in Iran to try to bring about regime change, and it was not successful the first time round either. In 1953, there was a democratically elected Prime Minister, Mossadegh, who the US and the UK actually overthrew because he was trying to nationalise the oil company at the time. At that time, it was known as the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. We know it today as BP. And the US and the UK didn't like the idea. I mean, as in so many conflicts, this all comes back to the oil. So they overthrew him and reinstalled the Shah of Iran, who was a monarch who had been unseated there. And he was very unpopular. He did act like a monarch, like an autocrat. He's very corrupt. And this directly led to the Iranian Revolution in 1979 and the overthrow of the Shah, of the monarchy, and the installation of the Islamic State. So in many ways, the very existence of the Islamic State of Iran is a direct result of the US trying to do this again. So it has failed previously in Iran. It's failed in Afghanistan, in Iraq. So there's no historic evidence really to suggest that the US will be able to be any more successful this time.
So this time, who was involved and why?
There are three main players here. Obviously, we have the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was really founded in ideological opposition to the United States, which to this day they continue to call the Great Satan. And over the intervening decades, and especially under the leadership of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed on Saturday, they have become more and more hardline in terms of developing a nuclear program, supporting other groups aimed at destabilizing the region, such as Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen, and really trying to assert themselves in the Middle East. Iran does not agree with the right of the State of Israel to exist. So Iran and Israel have been at loggerheads ever since as well. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has really taken this very seriously and particularly has been ratcheting up the animosity with Iran since the October the 7th attacks, which have caused him a lot of problems at home. So the tensions between Iran and Israel are very long-standing and have been simmering for for decades. Both of them see the other as an illegitimate regime. And then comes the US, obviously. The US has long been concerned about the Islamic Republic of Iran's goals, its efforts to exert hegemony across the region, and particularly about its nuclear program. So there have been a series of strikes over the past few years aimed at taking out that nuclear program when diplomatic talks repeatedly failed. I should remember, of course, that when Trump came into office, there was an agreement in place between the international community and Iran to stop that nuclear program. Trump ripped it up. So then there has been this ongoing burbling animosity there. Last year we saw that erupt with these limited strikes in the 12-day war in June when Israel and the US went in together and took out a lot of Iran's nuclear material, buried a lot of it under the rubble and really kind of neutralised it as that threat. So this has been going on for a long time.
Then in January this year, a reported 33,000 Iranians, anti-government protesters, were killed by security forces during nationwide protests.
So the thing that was very unusual and was a game changer in January was that the protests that erupted started again with the youth, with the disaffected young people who are very concerned about inability to find jobs, inflation, the economy, all the usual things, and the strictures of living in this autocratic state. But the thing that changed was, for the first time ever, the merchant class in Iran, the bazaris who run the bazaars and who are quite conservative, very loyal to the system, they joined the protests across the country and cities across the country because inflation was spiralling. But the main trigger for that was that the currency just plummeted overnight, and that caused economic mayhem, which was intolerable even for the most loyal people in that regime. And so that really led to this moment where Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu saw this widespread weakness across Iran and thought that this would be the moment. They were encouraging people to rise up against the regime, but they thought this would be the moment where the regime was sufficiently weakened that they could strike and maybe have a chance at regime change. So that has been the real game changer there.
To the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
Are the majority of the people on the ground celebrating this? Will they move forward with some sort of freedom?
This is a very complicated picture because Iran is quite a polarized society. So there are many young people under 35 who are cosmopolitan, who are outward looking, who want more freedom in their daily lives, who want to be able to read everything on the internet, who want good jobs. And so those are the people who are more liberal, more progressive in Iran, who are desperate for change. But there is also a group of very conservative, religious people who are loyal to the state. I would say the ratio of those two groups has been steadily changing over the years, so that now the people who want change, the size of that group is much greater than the conservative religious people who want the system to endure. So we are seeing this play out in all its forms across Iran now, and that there are many people who have taken to the streets, who have been celebrating, honking their horns, shouting, because they are so shocked and happy and relieved that this is happening, that the Supreme Leader has gone, but also a lot of public mourning and sadness from people who were loyal to the regime. So there are lots of different reactions depending on where you look in Iran.
You might be able to shed some light on this. There are stories that are coming out now that the son of the slain Supreme Leader, he'll be selected to replace him. But I understand, so correct me if I'm wrong, that his father actually opposed this, that Islam discourages sort of hereditary power.
Yes, that's right. I've seen the same reports that he didn't want to set up a dynasty inside Iran in the same way that has happened in other countries around the world. Of course, I think of North Korea and that place, but also like there's a lot of dynasties across the Middle East where leaders have passed power down to their sons. So he expressly apparently said that he did not want that to happen. But there had been a lot of succession planning in place inside Iran. The Supreme Leader was 86 years old and had become a lot weaker, obviously weaker in recent years. So they would have had plans in place to designate successors. But I had also I'd seen reporting that in the past few weeks, as the threat of war became more imminent, that across the senior Iranian positions, they were talking about succession at every level so that they would have people in place. As we've seen this week, the head of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the defence minister, a lot of senior leaders in Iran have been taken out in these strikes. So they had succession plans in place for those two.
How, Anna, has Iran responded? I mean, does it have the right or required manpower, weapons or ability to even go to war or even having a chance to defend this?
Yeah, so on the rhetorical front, they have been absolutely defiant in this case in terms of standing up and resisting what the US is doing. There is one very senior official, Ali Larijani, who is considered quite a pragmatist and a moderate, and he is, for all intents and purposes, the de facto leader of Iran at the moment. And he has been taking to social media, talking about America and the Zionist regime, as they call him. We will burn their hearts. We will make the Zionist criminals and shameless Americans regret their actions. So very strong words, and in a strange little twist, almost trolling President Trump in a way by writing many of his messages in all caps, which is, of course, the favoured method of communication of the President of the United States. So rhetorically, they have been very, very strong and resistant and vowing to fight on. And the thing is, they do have a lot of firepower here, and we've seen that already in the way that Israel has retaliated against these strikes, and that they are really trying to make this a lateral war. They are sending these kamikaze drones into countries across the Gulf region. So we might have seen those videos of drones ploughing into the sides of hotels in Dubai and other places, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, all across the UAE. They have been retaliating there and really drawing these countries in the region into this war so that they will not be able to sit on the sidelines but will be able to take sides. And so these drones, the same kind of drones that have been used in Ukraine, are relatively cheap. They are maybe a few tens of thousands, maybe $100,000, whereas missile defense is like $2 million a pop kind of thing. So orders of magnitude difference between the kind of warfare that we're seeing. So Iran is very tactically at the moment sending out all these drones and saving some of its bigger weapons maybe for later when they need them most.
So what about Trump and Netanyahu? How did they team up to take on Iran? Anna says that in recent history they have had tense moments and describes their relationship as transactional.
You know, there have been some tricky moments in the second Trump term, but fundamentally their values and their interests align. The US is the strongest backer of all of the United States. The two of them have been able to get over these bumps. But I think that it probably comes down to Netanyahu being very wily and knowing that Trump is prone to flattery or prone to being told that he can do something unprecedented and history making. So I can see that situation where Netanyahu has goaded Trump on, saying we have an opportunity now to take out the leader in the same way you took out Maduro.
President Trump says the United States military has carried out a large-scale attack on Venezuela and captured its president, Nicolas Maduro.
And saying that this could be a history-making moment for him. I think it's been really fascinating to hear how Israel has been planning this for so long. You know, Israel had hacked into into the Tehran traffic camera system and was able to keep tabs on where the Supreme Leader was moving and where he was at all times. And the fact that they saw on Saturday morning local time this opportunity where the Supreme Leader was not in a bunker but was in fact in his office next to a meeting of all these senior officials, just presented this opportunity that Netanyahu was probably able to say to Trump, if we strike now, we can take him out and you will go down in history as the person who did this.
There are reports and claims that this is perhaps just a convenient distraction for Trump after the Epstein files. What's your take on that?
I mean, there's probably a glimmer of truth in that. It may be a distraction. It's going to be very interesting, though, how this plays out politically in the United States, because Trump, when he came back in the second term, he campaigned he would not start any wars and would, in fact, stop wars. And so the whole MAGA base that supports Trump is very opposed to foreign intervention and spending money abroad, whether on wars or on aid. So the fact now that Trump has started this war, it's very much a war of choice. There was no imminent threat from Iran. Trump himself had said that they had destroyed Iran's nuclear stockpiles. So this was something that Trump very much decided to do with Netanyahu's support, maybe to distract from problems at home, maybe to go down in history. I mean, I'm not sure how this plays into his efforts to win the Nobel Peace Prize because he has started a war, but I'm sure he'll try and spin it in some way.
Sam Sachdeva, who covers foreign affairs and politics for Newsroom, has been watching the war closely. And while it is a world away, he says it will still impact New Zealand, including our petrol prices, KiwiSaver and trade.
That is the main risk for New Zealand, primarily economic. Geographically, we're very far away from the Middle East, so all these missiles flying overhead doesn't have a huge security impact for us. Of course, there are a few New Zealanders who are in Iran and other Middle Eastern countries that have been caught up by this, but if you talk about the longer term effect, it is going to be inflation. What price are we paying at the petrol pump with oil tankers disrupted, but also other people importing products into New Zealand, exporters trying to get their products around the place. There'll be trade disruptions. They might have to be paying more for some of these shipping services. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but I think at a time when the government and Reserve Bank already has concerns about inflation, was quite high in the last quarter, anything that's going to aggravate that is going to be a real headache for them and for New Zealand consumers, lest we forget, who are, still dealing with a very long and ongoing cost of living crisis. So this is sort of the last thing we need.
You just mentioned the government, and obviously our Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, he is copping, fair to say, Sam, a lot of flack for his initial response. He said he misspoke. Talk us through this.
Yeah, look, let me preface this by saying I do not envy the Prime Minister his position having to deal with such complex geopolitical matters. Yes, rather him than me, but saying that he did not acquit himself very well when he spoke after his cabinet meeting at the Weekly Post cabinet press conference, was sort of pressed on whether New Zealand has a view on the legality of these US-Israel strikes, what we find acceptable conduct, and I think he struggled to really put forward a clear position, but the most egregious problem, and the one that he did have to correct, is when he said that New Zealand would support any actions that would prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon or from engaging in state-sponsored terrorism. Now, those are both horrible activities, but to say any action, I think rightly led some to question, well, does that suggest we have no red lines? Is there no action that we consider beyond the pale? So, yes, he held that position on the Monday, sort of struggled to articulate it, and then came back the next day and said,
I think I misspoke on that. I mean, we've long supported action, but it's not at any cost, obviously.
I think an uncomfortable 24 hours for him, and probably a few more tricky questions to manage in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because it's quite a rapid sort of global reaction to these strikes on Iran. It's been dominating all week. Do we, and by we, our government, have a clear and coherent foreign policy position, or week on?
I think it is difficult. It is difficult for probably every country because you've got some competing thoughts here. One is there is very little, essentially no sympathy for the Iranian regime. I think Christopher Luxon is right to point out their history of repression of their own people, their role in state-sponsored terrorism around the globe, which has been well documented, and their efforts to build up their nuclear capabilities and potentially get a nuclear weapon. So all of that earns justified condemnation, but there is the question of international law. There's the United Nations Charter, there are rules that apply around attacks. So I think trying to strike a balance between condemning what is happening in Iran and saying we have no love for that regime and what it stood for, but there are still rules and laws that have to be applied. I think that's where the government and other governments have struggled. I think we've seen New Zealand's partners, the likes of Australia and Canada, the United Kingdom, all sort of walk these careful lines, and some of those leaders have faced criticism from their own populations around, well, where is the right balance here, and are you actually, respecting the international laws as they stand?
Yeah, because some voices, they were coming out saying, God, we need to be taking a stronger position on the legality of these strikes under international law.
I think the government should recognise that there has been a breach of international law.
It's clear the international rules-based order is under threat. It is not being followed.
Do you think we should be more vocal, or, are there risks of being more vocal?
Look, well, there are risks, and I think that's why the government has taken a careful approach. And, you look at what Donald Trump has had to say so far. He has been quite critical of Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who actually did provide some principled support for what's been happening in Iran, but said, the UK will not support aggressive offensive strikes by the US. That's led to Trump calling him out a number of times. So I think that is the primary fear probably that is motivating the government, that you stick your head out too far, Trump intervenes, and we end up with some higher tariffs or some other form of retaliation. On the other hand, you've had Chris Hipkins, Helen Clark and others say, well, the principle is what matters here. We need to stand up for these rules and international norms, even if it comes at a risk to us. We've done that in the past. I think there's been a lot of discussion about the Clark government's approach to the Iraq War in 2003 and the sense that history has borne them out. So, look, I have sympathy for the government maybe wanting to choose its words carefully, but I think Helen Clark and others are right that words and principles matter, and if we do say we have an independent foreign policy and we are able to speak our mind, then we should be able to do so when those international rules are put at threat.
Do you think that we could be dragged into discussions, about sanctions, about peacekeeping, or sending boots on the ground from New Zealand? Is that what could happen? Is that what the public wants?
I think there is no public appetite and no political appetite for that matter for any sort of direct military involvement. The Prime Minister has been asked about this and said, look, no, we've had no requests and that's not something we would consider. There are different elements to it though. You've kind of talked about sanctions, is there some role in peacekeeping eventually, or logistics or something like that? So there are sort of elements or rungs down the ladder beyond that top option of sort of military intervention and sort of aiding the strike. So, look, in time there may well come an ask from the US, and that could put the government in a difficult position. I think we will probably look to provide some sort of aid and financial support for people in Iran eventually. Sanctions are something that we've been looking at more actively. We're still sort of restricted and what we can do because we don't have standalone sanctions legislation, but there are sort of travel bans that we've put in place on Iranian figures and other steps that we can take. So, look, we will definitely come under pressure at some point to do more, and the question will be how we respond.
My last question today goes to Anna. How will this war end?
I think there's nobody who knows how this ends. I mean, Trump's own interpretation of what this war even is changes day by day. His goals change day by day. He's talking about regime change, and then his defense secretary is contradicting him. So it's not clear what the goals are. I think that this probably can be sustained for some time because the will to destroy each other is there on both sides. And the Iranian regime and the people who remain in place, their single highest priority is staying in place, staying in power, continuing to exist. So they will be in survival mode. And as we have seen in their response to the protests, when they've massacred their own people, they will stop at nothing to try to stay in power and things. So I think that we can expect them to give this their all and unleash whatever firepower they consider necessary to be able to stay in power and to stop any kind of opposition movement taking over Iran and unseating the revolutionaries.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Anna Fifield and Sam Suchdeva. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by William Saunders. I'm Amanda Gillies. Matua.